Great. Okay. So welcome everyone, and thank you so much for braving the cold, frigid New England weather and making your way out here. My name is Dinius. I work for Plymouth County Extension, and today we're going to be talking about a topic that is near and dear to my heart. I feel like these days, pretty much anyone who's, with family, relative, friends, has known someone that has suffered from the diseases that can come with a tick bite. So I'm hoping at the end of this presentation that you're no longer afraid to see ticks, that you feel empowered and you feel like capable of dealing with what the environment presents us outside. And that's kind of my shtick, is like, I'm not going to try to scare you, although I will talk to you about the realities of tick bites. I think that's really important that we understand how serious this issue is. However, I think it's also important to know that everything about preventing tick bites is within your power, right? You can do it all, right? So let's start with kind of like a story or an anecdote, right? So like, let's say, it's tough now because I feel like everyone these days is on their phones, looking at social media, playing video games online. But maybe you're one of the people like me who likes to do things outside. And you wake up in the morning and you look outside and you say, my, that looks like a nice day to spend some time outside. And you climb out, you take off your PJs, you go outside, you put on some clothes. I don't judge. I don't know what you guys wear. But you go out and you go for a little frolic through the woods, or maybe you do some gardening or spring cleanup, or you go fishing, or you take a hike in the woods. And then you come in, you say, oh, that was fun. And then maybe you go to the bathroom. Maybe it's when you take your shower. You look down and you find something that wasn't there before. And this thing is attached to your body, and you're like, what in the world just happened? It's a tick, right? And these ticks, these are sneaky little creatures. They will climb up your body, and they don't necessarily bite the first place that they see. And they will dodge hairs, crawling all over your body, looking for the juiciest place to bite. And sometimes, and I'm going to tell you this, sometimes they like to bite places that really only your doctor should have access to. Because it's not, it's really just one of those places. And you're like, so not only is this thing attached to you, sucking your blood, taking things from you, it's on these very vulnerable areas that you don't want people knowing that, necessarily seeing, and you've got a bug attached to it. So all these things might be racing through your mind. How did this get here? When did it get here? Is it carrying a disease? Is it going to make me sick? Is it my fault? How do I take it off? Should I call my doctor? And you go into panic mode, right? So now I'm here telling you, step one, first of all, don't panic. And secondly, there are all these different things you can do up until this point to prevent that from happening. And then on the back end, after the tick bite, there are things you can do afterward that help mitigate that risk, right? And that's all we're talking about. It's like, you're never going to completely eliminate risk, but you can mitigate it and you can reduce it as much as possible. So let's talk about maybe people are attending this, or maybe people are watching it that may not necessarily know why ticks are a problem. And again, this isn't to scare people, but I do want to kind of hammer home exactly the world that we are living in today, right? How risky is it to live in Massachusetts when it comes to being bit by a tick, right? So we estimate that there are about almost 500,000 cases of Lyme disease that occur every single year. And you might think, well, that's not that much because we have about 325 million people in the United States. So that's a small fraction of the overall population. However, 95% of all those cases are concentrated in just 13 states, right? The upper Midwest and the Northeast. And I know it looks like Massachusetts doesn't have any cases of Lyme disease. I'd like to think that it's because of me, that I'm so good at my job, and everyone listening to this is gonna do exactly what I say. Even the people out in Western Mass who don't know who I am, they're still doing what I say, and then everyone outside of Massachusetts just doesn't listen to me, right? So, but it's not really the way it works. It's that our surveillance in this state is collected differently than the rest of the country. And so it just doesn't, the CDC has decided, oh, you guys don't count, right? So that's basically the way it works. But Lyme disease is just as bad here, if not worse, than Connecticut, Rhode Island, New Hampshire, and Vermont, all the states around us, New York. There are many, many cases that we experience living in this state. So I know, and you might think like, why would I live in Massachusetts? Well, every state has its own thing that they deal with, right? You've got earthquakes in California, right? You can't do anything about that. You've got, in Texas and Oklahoma, you've got tornadoes. You've got all these, and then in Florida, you've got like mosquitoes, and you have people from Florida, right? So you've got all these different things that people deal with, and there's nothing you can really do about that. Except here we live with ticks, and there is something that you can do about it. You have that power, right? We estimate that the economic burden of Lyme costs us about $3,000 per patient per year, right? So I don't make a lot of money. So if I just protect a few people every year, I'm well worth the investment, and I'm hoping that I can even give it like that. I can give that back to the community by preventing that from happening. So you've got your own health reasons why you don't want to get sick, and also money reasons why you wouldn't want to get sick either. And Lyme disease, most of the time, some people take it lightly. They say, well, I just took some medicine and I was fine. But there is a small proportion of people that suffer from long-term symptoms of Lyme disease, and we're not even sure right now how to necessarily treat it or what exactly is causing it. But I do want to give a little bit of a story to maybe, again, drive home exactly how serious this can be. There was this woman, and here's some testimony. She says, I was pretty healthy and fit and busy. Since this happened, getting Lyme disease, I don't have that concentration anymore. Some days I struggle to read, write, or even speak, right? Not being able to formulate words properly. And then there's this constant fatigue, right? And so we're finding all of these different things associated with Lyme disease that can be pretty intense. In addition, Lyme disease, while it is the most common tick-borne disease to experience here in Massachusetts, it's not the only one. There are 9 other known diseases that you can get from ticks living in Massachusetts, for a total of 10. And you can see here, I've got them color-coded based on the species of tick that can transmit that particular disease. So you have Lyme disease down here. It can only be transmitted by this green bordered tick. That's a deer tick. The red is your dog ticks, and the blue is the Lone Star ticks. So you can kind of see that a lot of these diseases are pretty specific to the type of tick that can bite you. And I want you to remember that, because what you know about ticks is key to preventing those bites, right? Knowing that you're bit by a deer tick means that you're only at risk for these diseases in green. You don't have to worry about these other ones, right? And telling your doctor which species of tick can be important for diagnosis. So all this stuff, the more information you have, the better off you are. However, I want to emphasize known diseases, right? Because ticks are kind of one of those funny creatures where the more you look, the more you find. And what we have recently found is a virus called heartland disease is found in New York and found a lot more widespread than we initially anticipated. Especially given that name Heartland virus, you'd think it'd be found further south than Long Island. And this is a virus that was detected in 2021 based on a tick that was sent in for testing. And they asked this gentleman who had this tick attached, have you done any traveling? And he was like, no, I haven't at all. I live here. And they were like, wow, that's weird. And when they conducted testing on deer, looking at deer blood, they found that it was pretty much widespread throughout Long Island. Bourbon virus, likewise, all of the shaded areas indicate deer that were positive, that had tested positive for this bourbon virus, which was found, again, like Kentucky, right? That's where it got its name from. And now it's in New York. And I want to just kind of emphasize that this is where Massachusetts touches New York. I don't think this virus stopped at the border, right? It's almost certainly here in Massachusetts. It's just a matter of someone looking, right? So when I talk about 10 known diseases, we don't know if these viruses are here or not, but they probably are. So that's where Massachusetts touches. There's another, I don't know if the disease is the right word. I guess syndrome is really the proper term for it. It's called alpha-gal syndrome, and this is not a female superhero, despite the name alpha-gal. This is something that you can, a condition that you can have based on the bite of a Lone Star tick can transmit this, and we're not entirely sure what causes it. And this can give you what a lot of newspapers are calling the allergy to red meat. But it's not just red meat, it's any mammalian product. And you might think like mammals, like what do I eat that's a mammal? Milk, ice cream, cheese, burgers, bacon, even gummy bears that contain gelatin. That's a mammalian product. It could even be in certain types of medication grown in maybe pig cell lines, and that's one of the ways that we first initially discovered it, were people getting sick from medication grown in pig cell lines. And it's funny because this allergy it's funny, it's different from a normal allergy where you may get symptoms only up to 8 hours following that meal. So it can be a very delayed response. So you could eat your burger, and then in the middle of the night, you eat it at 6, and then in the middle of the night, you wake up, and you might even be having something like anaphylaxis or hives or something. Like, what the heck caused that? Is it my sheets? Is it the detergent? What is it? And it's the burger that you ate for dinner, which is wild to think of, right? And this is becoming increasingly more common. Very interesting. So again, the bite of it from the bite of a tick. And we talked about how Lone Star tick is the tick to watch for when you're wanting to prevent alpha-gal. And you can see here, based on this study, Lone Star tick is in Massachusetts. It's been found in Massachusetts. It's expanded out. The historic range is down here. Despite the name Lone Star, it's not found throughout the Lone Star state. It's called the Lone Star tick because of this white dot, but you can find it here in Massachusetts. And then this was a study published in 2019, and I think that this can definitely be updated as of this year or last year, where it says reported, but we do have seen it established in this county as well. And you can see it here established on the Cape, established on the islands. So you can get, it's only a matter of time before we find it here in Plymouth County. This tick is associated with areas that are closer to the water, following maybe what we might consider a migratory bird path. We're still not exactly sure how it's being distributed, but that's a good guess that maybe migratory birds are moving it around. There's another tick that's kind of on the horizon. It's called the Asian longhorn tick. This is a tick that was brought into this country, so it's not a native species of tick. And you can see that it's a very prolific tick. That's a single blade of grass. This tick consists of only females, and they reproduce asexually. So they don't need men in their life. They're strong and independent, and they can do it all by themselves. And these ticks, they have not really been associated with diseases in people, but they have been associated with diseases of cattle. And so they're just a funny tick. So something to watch out for if you are in agriculture, or if you own horses or sheep. Definitely a tick that you would want to be aware of. And for instance, this is how we first found it. This was a photo from one of the sheep where it was first discovered. And you can see a single ear of this sheep just completely covered. All different life stages of this tick covering that sheep's ear. This is an updated map of where we have seen it, and you can see here in Massachusetts we have seen it out in Western Mass, and then down here in Rhode Island we've seen it as well. So again, just a matter of time before it gets here. And we discovered it on Nantucket as well, so you can see this Asian longhorn tick. But tick-borne diseases are preventable, and I do want to get that across. I have never had Lyme disease my entire life. I've never been bit by a tick. And I do a ton of stuff outside. This is me hiking. I'm at the top of Mount Washington here. I didn't drive up, I hiked it. I collect ticks as part of my job. I conduct tick surveillance. It's really high tech. So this is what a college degree earns you, is the ability to have a stick that you drag through the woods, right? But those are all those ticks, and I collected those, I want to say in March. This was a few years back, but that's pretty average for about maybe 15 minutes to half an hour of collecting ticks in the woods. Ticks are everywhere. You can find a lot of ticks. Sometimes people tell me, they walk through the woods and they say, I picked up like 5 ticks, there's so many. And I have to bite my tongue and be like, I'm like, yeah, no, that's a lot. And I just kind of roll with it. I don't want to be like, actually, there's, but really actually, you walk in the woods and there's hundreds of ticks in the woods. They're just everywhere, right? It's just a numbers game for ticks. You just need to bump into one, and that's it. Like that's how the ticks operate. But that's pretty typical for a warm winter day. I mean, like I said, this was probably February or March. I believe it was 2020 that I found these ticks, and it's not surprising to me. Walking around a parking lot, believe it or not. But the fact that I don't have Lyme disease is not luck, it's science, right? I am one of the least lucky people that you guys will ever meet. I am not a lucky man. I am probably the only man that you'll ever meet that has bet money on Tom Brady and lost every single time. Like, Not just once, not just one time. Like 3 times I bet money on Tom Brady. It's like the only 3 times I've ever seen him lose on TV. It's like the only time. So now I just don't bet money on him. I mean, he's retired, but I don't bet money. But in general now. But I'm not lucky. I am a scientist. I look at data. I follow data. I look at trends. And this is, all the advice in here is going to be based on data, right? So it's not stuff that you're just going to look up on the internet or hear from a friend or hear through the grapevine or use your own gut or own intuition. No, this stuff is stuff that is based on science, right? We have studies to back up all the things that I'm going to tell you today, right? I'm going to start with the stuff that is the most important. And I know this stuff might get a little bit dry towards the end. And so the stuff that is a little bit less important, I know some people like maybe want to play on their phones or get really bored. I don't take offense if you guys want to do that. That's okay. But I do want to make sure I get this part across to you. Protect yourself and your pets, first and foremost. Yard protection, protecting your yard, secondary. If you're always protecting yourself, it doesn't matter where you go, your yard, your neighbor's yard, out in the woods, you're going to be safe. Let's start with some biology about ticks, right? Ticks sense animal activity, but they don't have eyes. Like this deer tick has no eyes. Lone Star tick's a different story. We're not going to talk about that one. We're going to focus on the deer tick. This tick senses you through its sense of smell, quote unquote, right? On the end of its legs, it has these pits called Howler's organs, and they function like a nose. So in the same way that when you wake up in the morning and you smell bacon or you smell eggs cooking, and you don't know, you can't see it, it's behind a wall or a door, but you know that there's food on the table, right? When you go outside, this tick cannot see you, but all the animals running around, the deer, the squirrels, the chipmunks, you, your dog, that's all going to give off these scents that are going to fill the air, and that tick is going to say, today's the day, right? Today's the day. This tick lives for 2 years, and only needs to eat 3 times throughout its entire life, right? So so they have a lot of time that they can just sit around waiting, right? Again, it's a numbers game, and they have a long time that they can wait and just hope that something brushes up against it. The other thing about this is that because this tick does not have eyes, do you think this tick is capable of climbing trees and jumping out the moment you walk underneath it? No, right? Do you think this tick is capable of jumping onto you as you're walking through the woods from vegetation? No, right? It has no idea where you are. Do you think anyone would be good at jumping onto someone, onto someone blindfolded, right? They would not be able to do that. In addition, the tick's legs, they just don't have the machinery to jump. You can wave, like if you look at this and you take the tick, you can wave your hand in front of this, it will not jump. It has a claw that it uses for grasping onto you. So it's a little bit like Velcro, right? You have to brush up against this tick in order to pick it up. It's not going to jump, right? It doesn't know where you are. But when it's excited, when it knows that food is in the environment, it will wave these claws around wildly, like windmill wildly, right? So all it takes is just a little bit, like a little touch, and that tick is stuck to you, right? Fur, right? Clothing, skin, rubber boots. A lot of people think that if you wear rubber boots, that the tick cannot climb up that rubber. What's that tick doing, right? Is that tick climbing rubber? I think that tick's climbing rubber, right? Full disclosure, it did take a few times for that tick to climb up, but it did. It made it all the way to the top. So again, one of those things that you might look up online and say, people say, wear rubber boots, they can't climb rubber. And then you have a tick on the back of your head and you say, it must have jumped out of a tree because my rubber boots could not have allowed it to climb up. When in fact, that tick climbed up your rubber boots, climbed all the way over your body, and bit you in the back of the neck. Again, ticks don't bite the first place that they see. Sometimes they like to climb over your body for hours before they bite that. You could be walking through the woods in like just a swimsuit, and the tick could climb over your entire body and bite you in the back of the neck. They just do that. They pick these weird spots, and they take their time when they're selecting a site. So how do you keep ticks from finding you, right? The first thing I want to recommend are the use of repellents. And you might like roll your eyes like, oh, of course, like I'm listening to you just to hear this. Well, it is actually true. There's a reason why we keep repeating over and over again, use repellents. And I think people have a lot of opinions and a lot of false information about repellents, so I want to talk to you about what they actually are and how they actually work. Repellents, despite their name repellent, don't actually really repel ticks. It's a little bit of a misnomer, right? They work the same way that maybe perfume would work in this room. If you filled the room with perfume and then you had a pizza sitting over there, I might not be able to smell that pizza as well, right? It's the same idea, it's the same concept. So if this tick is blind, right, and is relying on its scent to find you, right, and you're wearing repellent, and this repellent fills those howler's organs and basically knocks them out, inactivates them, right, and now they no longer function, that tick has no idea that you're around, right? It's a little bit like an invisibility cloak. So that's how the repellents actually work. And you don't actually need more than 20%. So what we found is that once you reach that 20% mark, that is enough repellent to block those howler's organs. Wearing 100% doesn't block it more, right? Like if you have enough perfume in this room that you can no longer smell, putting more perfume in the air doesn't make you not smell more. Right? It just doesn't work that way, right? The repellents that I recommend are EPA registered. And a lot of folks bring this up. They go, what about the organic, the all-natural repellents? And the reason why I'm recommending these repellents is that, again, they're EPA registered. That means they go through a testing process, a regulatory process where they are tested for both safety and efficacy, right? And that means when you go to the store and you buy a product with DEET, right? A lot of people don't like DEET, but you buy a product with DEET. Does not matter if it's the name brand, like Off, or the generic brand, it's gonna work the same, right? It's gonna have that consistent function where it's always gonna work no matter what store you go to, no matter what company, no matter what the package looks like. You get 20% DEET, it's gonna work the same, right? You get an all-natural product, and this could be effectively water. And I could repackage a bottle of water and sell that to you and call it an all natural, because water is all natural. I could sell that to you, and there's nothing illegal about that, right? It could be complete fake, right? Or I could sell you a product that I have spent a long time working on. It's a perfect combination of essential oils, and it does work. Or I could sell you another bottle that has a concentration of essential oils that are actually toxic to people and animals, and that is not illegal either. You don't know. And you don't know if it's going to vary from bottle to bottle, store to store, or retailer to retailer. So that's the reason why I don't recommend them. But if you make them on your own and you do trust it, some of these essential oils have been shown to repel ticks. Either not as long as these registered repellents or not as strongly as the registered repellents, but they can work. So if that is your groove and you do kind of trust your supplier, then okay, right? But for everyone else in the room and everyone else in the audience, go with one of these. And I do say you don't need more than 20%, but that doesn't mean you have to go up to the cap. I've got two little kids, a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old. I use 7%, and that's enough, right? Because they're just little kids, and they're just playing in the yard. They're not hiking through the woods. You know, all these things. I still check them for ticks when I give them showers at night, and they don't have ticks on them. But the 7% is enough. Like, you don't always have to go to that cap just because I'm telling you that that's the limit. And any of these 3 ingredients, gold, right? They're all going to work. So look at the bottle. You'll find the active ingredient. Again, not the name of the packaging, but the active ingredient on the bottle. This is another product. It's called permethrin. It's not really a repellent, although it does have some repelling properties to it. This functions completely different. This is a product just for use on clothing, never skin, right? And it's a little bit of a process to treat your clothes with this, but after you're through that process, it lasts for up to a month. So it's a little bit of an investment, a little bit of more work up front, but then it lasts for a month. And if you remember anything from this presentation, the one thing I want you to remember is this. This is the thing that is like the most unknown thing about the tick prevention world, and is probably the best thing to remember about the tick prevention world. So what does this permethrin do, right? You spray it on your clothes, and if any ticks, this is a tick climbing on my pants. I just got done tick collecting, and these pants are treated with it. You can see it crawling over my pants. It'll lift up its legs, like that, right? And fall off, right? That tick is actually dead now. It's paralyzed. So if you can imagine having a set of clothes that you could walk anywhere you wanted, and all of the ticks that touch you bing, bing, bing. It doesn't make that noise. It's false advertising. Bing, bing. And they're falling off dead, and it's just like a suit of armor that you don't have to think about ticks. A lot of people say, like, they get, when they hear about ticks, or if they've suffered from Lyme disease, they say, I don't want to go in the woods. I want to lock myself indoors. I don't want to do anything. I'm going to give up gardening, give up running through the woods. You don't have to do that. You wear this stuff, and you can go anywhere that you want. It can be like back in the good old days when we didn't have to worry about ticks, right? I still recommend you follow these things up with tick checks, right? You still want to do that because you don't know. But this is about as good as you get to it's not going to be 100%, but it's very close to that, right? I can't legally say 100%. But in a few studies, and there have been studies on this, where it was indeed in those studies 100% protection. So fabrics only, never skin. Apply in advance. You have to wait for this to dry. If it is not dry and you wear it in the woods, it is not going to work, right? It's not going to function properly. The store-bought products, if you buy a product from a store, lasts for 6 washings or 1 month. I treat my family's clothes once a month. I take it all on the porch, spray it all down, let it dry overnight because it's good for a full month, bring it all indoors, and they don't even know that I do that, right? They're just like, oh, like we never get ticks. It's awesome, right? There's a company called Insect Shield, and they have a proprietary process where their product is good for 70 washings. And in a study that I read, it was about a year of like very heavy use. So if you wore this like a few times a week, every single week, it would last for like a year. That's good. So if you wanted to get a suit of gardening clothes, hiking clothes, camping clothes, like my tick collecting clothes that I go when I do tick surveillance, right? All of these things, you could do that for a relatively cost-effective price, right? It's not that bad. A bottle of this stuff you can get at Target or Walmart might cost you about $15 and might last 3 months. $5 a month, protection from ticks. That's really solid.
Can I interject here for a second?
Sure.
I actually used that after my husband saw you talk before.
Yep.
And I did exactly what you told him to do, which was I sprayed everything outside and I left it out there overnight. And I used it to go on hikes, and I used it for gardening, and once a month, it works.
Yeah, testimonial right here. Yeah, awesome.
It was kind of a pain to do because I had to spray.
Yep.
But I felt so much safer being out there.
Yep.
And I never saw anything fall off me, but I trust you.
Exactly, yeah. Well, it's rare. Like when I saw that on me, I was like, oh, I have to record this because it never, I got to catch it.
I wondered about the shoes. You can do the shoes.
So you do shoes. You can do any fabrics, right? So you can do like a backpack, a hat, a shoe. You can do like a tent, a sleeping bag. You can do any of these things, right? They recommend like not underwear, I think because you don't want that like close to your skin because it might cause some skin irritation. But anything on the outside, yeah, I say go for it. Keep cats away until it's dry. I'm a cat person. This stuff is derived from a toxin that a plant toxin, and cats have a sensitivity to it. So even though it's a very, very low concentration, it is possible that it might cause some negative effects on a cat. However, I've spoken with a number of veterinarians, and they've all said once it's dry, it's perfectly okay for a cat to like lay on your clothes, to sit on your clothes. They're really just worried about it being absorbed in the skin or ingested when it's the wet product or some other route where it's wet. That's when they're really, really concerned about it. But once it's dry, it's bound tightly to the fabric. You can even wash your clothes, and if the clothes are still wet, it's still bound to that fabric, and it's not a concern once it's dried the first time. So the cats, wait for it to dry. Protection for cats and dogs, right? Speak with your veterinarian. A lot of these products are very unique and specific to certain animals. A lot of animals have certain individual sensitivities to certain medications. I'm not a veterinarian, so please speak with your vet. When you walk into the store, make sure you pay attention to the packaging. Like this is a small dog. I know it looks like a cat, but I promise you it is a small dog. This product is 44% permethrin. So that stuff that I'm telling you to spray on your clothes, that's 0.5%. This is something that is many, many more times concentrated put on the back of a 4-pound dog, right? And it's a medication formulated for that dog, but it is not formulated for a cat, and it can really, really harm that cat. If we're concerned about 0.5% harming a cat, 44% would harm a cat much more severely, right? Counterfeit products. With all the online shopping that people are doing, there is this big concern about counterfeit products. There has been a concern about these Seresto collars. We used to recommend them a lot. They're great. They work really well. However, especially starting around like 2020, there was a large amount of people complaining that Seresto collars were harming their pets, right? And a lot of vets and a lot of scientists could not figure out why, right? And one of the thoughts is that maybe it's because a lot of people, more people are buying these products through online sites. And one veterinarian's office did experience that exact thing. So I don't know if it's all these collars doing it, but it does happen from time to time. This dog was brought into this vet's office and it was lethargic. It had burns all over its neck. And they were like, what is going on? Is it a Seresto collar? And they thought it was, and so they had the woman bring in the collar, bring in the packaging, and what you have here is a fake Seresto collar purchased on Amazon and a real one that was compared to from the vet's office. I can't tell the difference, right? A fake collar here and a real one here. And here's the fake and here's the real one, right? How would you know, right? And after this vet's office posted this online, I guarantee you this company probably changed the packaging, right? So you don't know what you're getting when you go through an online site. And that could be Walmart as well. It could be Amazon. Go through your veterinarian's office or a vet trusted site. If you go to your vet's office and you say, what sites do you recommend? If they recommend a site like Chewy or Petco or PetSmart, go through something like that. Don't go through Amazon or Walmart or Target just to save a few dollars. A lot of these sites are fulfilled through a third-party supplier, and you don't necessarily always see that when you go to buy it. You just see, oh, this is like 30 bucks and it normally cost me 50. What a deal, right? And again, you don't know. Checking yourself and your pets. How do I know that I've never been bit by a tick, right? I check myself every single day, right? Even when I'm camping in the woods with a group of guys, I still check myself every day. In order to check the back of my neck and behind my ears, I use my fingertips. And even places I can see, I often use my fingertips because that can be more sensitive than my own vision, right? I might not be able to see something, but I'll feel it, right? And if it feels like a scab, a skin tag, a mole, well, that's something to look at, right? That's something to pay more attention to. But you would want to use that to feel different parts of your body and find those ticks. If you do it every single day, that's what I recommend. It shouldn't take you more than 10 seconds to do a full body tick check, right? I mean, that's quicker than like checking a post on Facebook, right? Faster than getting mad at why would they reply to me and tag me in this? Why would that happen, right? It's very, very quick. And what we know about ticks and tick-borne disease is that most of those diseases have not been shown to be transmitted in less than 24 hours, which means that if you are doing this every day and you catch that tick and it's only been attached for like 18 hours, you can't say with certainty, but you can say with a lot of confidence that you are not going to get one of those diseases, right? That you, on the safer end, catching those ticks as quick as possible is going to minimize that risk. And I like to give these statistics about how people don't really do tick checks. 90%, that's 9 out of 10 people, do not remove nymphs in less than 24 hours, right? Most people are not finding them and removing them in less than 24 hours. That means people are not doing these tick checks. 81% of people in this study with Lyme disease never remembered being bit. So if Lyme disease takes 24 hours or more to transmit and these people don't remember being bit, that tick may have been attached for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 days, fallen off, and they never even knew it was there. That is possible. These ticks inject things into our body that are going to dull our senses. They anesthetize the area. They knock out your immune system so it's not itchy. They can't feel it, right? And they modulate this to different people's immune systems, right? They inject things that suppress pain, right? So we can't feel that. They numb that area, right? They promote blood flow to the site, right? They prevent that site from clotting. They are masters of this, like, essentially chemical warfare on our bodies, right? They're injecting all of these active ingredients into our body that are going to really knock out all of our body's defenses, right? So there's a reason why we can't detect these just on our own like we could a mosquito bite or something like that. They're really good at doing this. And ticks have been around for an estimated like 425-ish million years, right? And if they need blood to survive, and they need to take blood to survive, and they've been doing this for 425 million years, they're flipping good at doing it, right? They don't survive that long if they're not good at doing it, right? So yeah, how do you do a tick check? I recommend using your fingertips as well as your vision. What parts of your body do you check? You can Google it online, and you can find all of these different confusing charts, and some of them don't even agree with each other, or you can just kind of forget about that and just check your whole body. I will tell you this, there is not a spot on your body that a tick cannot bite. It can bite your knuckles, behind your ear, behind your leg, between your toes. If there's skin, a tick can bite it. There are spots on your body that ticks prefer, and we will find ticks a vast majority of the time attached to those particular areas of your body. But if you only check those parts of your body and you don't check the other areas, that's going to leave you at risk. Check your whole body, folks. What if you still get bit? Well, all hope is not lost. If you still do indeed find a tick attached to you, the idea is that you're finding it early by doing those tick checks every day, and you're getting it off as quick as possible. How do you remove it as quick as possible? Pair of tweezers, firmly grasp it, pull straight up. Don't use matches, don't use gasoline, nail polish remover, Vaseline. You might be looking at me like I'm crazy. People do this, and people tell me, and they brag about it. They're like, I like to burn it off, like it somehow makes them more manly. It does not. It does not. Get it off with tweezers. And the reason we recommend this is because this is the safest and most consistent way to get a tick off, right? If you use Vaseline, that could get a tick off, but what we have found is that the tick regurgitates in the process, and not only is that disgusting that a tick is throwing up inside your body, we don't know if that enhances the risk of getting disease, right? You pull it off with tweezers, that's gonna get that tick off clean and safe. If this part of the tick that breaks off, people call it the head, it's not really the head is actually back here. This is the mouth of the tick. If this breaks off, it's actually okay. It can cause a secondary infection, right, in the same way that a splinter could cause a secondary infection, but the Lyme disease or any of those diseases that we talked about are not in this part of the body. They're in the back part of the body. So you get the back part off. This is like an inert object. It's like a straw that stayed stuck in your body. And if you've got something like a dog or a small child, you just want to prevent a secondary infection, so you want to prevent like a bacterial infection or something like that from getting in. So you want to put like maybe Neosporin, put a Band-Aid on it, and kiss it all better, and just send that on their way, right? You can try to dig it out, but this thing is an object covered in these backward-facing barbs. It creates a glue-like cement around it. That thing is in there to stay, and you're not going to get it out without pulling out skin. So that's the personal protection. That's the real meat and potatoes of this. If you want to know more, this is how you would protect your yard. And I do like to leave this to the end because this really is secondary to the personal protection. You do full personal protection, you're going to be safe no matter where you go. Yard protection is just kind of that secondary layer, right? And it's going to cost more, it's going to be less effective. So how do you protect your yard, right? So I'm going to tell you, this is a yard where if you go out here and I were to collect ticks, I'm not going to find any ticks right here. Where am I going to find the ticks? The tree line right here, right where these people have their swing set. So what does this tell me? Either these people don't know where ticks are, or they really don't care about their kids, right? It's one or the other. But this is maybe a reason why kids age 5 to 9 have the highest rate of Lyme disease. They're the ones playing in the woods, and they're playing closest to the woods, right? And the next highest age range are the seniors. So it tells me that maybe it's the seniors playing with the kids, and mom and dad are just playing on their phones. I don't know. Why do ticks like the tree line? Deer ticks require high humidity, 82% and up. On average, because of this, on average, only about 6.3 are active at any time. So when you remember that photo of me collecting all of those ticks in about 15 to 30 minutes, that's 6% of the entire tick population that could be collected in that area. Crazy, right? It's wild, right? Because of this, ticks like to kind of spend most of their time underneath the leaf layer, protected from sun, protected from wind, in the shade. When you pick up those leaves, it's nice and damp. They like that close to the soil, right? So when you think about deer ticks, you're looking at edge habitat, about 10 feet from the forest edge. And this doesn't have to be like a full forest. This could just be like a stand of trees. Like if you have, me and my neighbors were separated by a row of maybe 3 trees dense. That's the forest. That's technically the forest. It just has to be a few trees that are going to create that shady environment where all of these animals like to live. Robins, veery, grackle, chipmunks, squirrels, deer. We call it the deer tick, but the deer tick actually feeds on over 150 different species of animal. Why do we call it the deer tick? Again, like repellents, it's a misnomer. Why do we call it the deer tick? And people are like, well, I see deer, so of course I have ticks. You can have deer ticks in areas that you don't have deer, right? That you can have, they can feed on a number of different animals, right? Do you have robins? Do you have squirrels? Do you have chipmunks? All these different animals. And again, the shade, the vegetation, all very, very helpful for tick survival. 70% of Lyme disease cases occur in backyards. That's an estimate, right? So we think that most people are not getting Lyme disease going out hiking. They're getting Lyme disease from gardening, playing frisbee with their kids, having a barbecue with friends, doing all these things when their guard is down, when they're having fun, when they're kicking back with a glass of wine or a brew, right? That's when these ticks are active, especially because they've got these yards that are set up that way. Another study kind of demonstrating that it's not necessarily tall grass or a certain way you mow your lawn. It has to do with the proximity to woods area, right? So this was a study where they showed they were looking at trails through the woods in conservation land, and they mowed the sections of the woods. So when they mowed certain areas, and they dragged over these areas looking for ticks, and they found that it didn't matter if the grass was tall or cut short. There were ticks across the entire path, right? So when people say walk along the center of trails, this is a trail that is about 15 feet wide, and it does not matter where you walk on this trail. It doesn't matter that the grass is short. It doesn't matter that the grass is tall. There are ticks throughout the entire trail, right? Sometimes trails are you can't, even though you're walking on the center of them, there's ticks on both sides. You're going to get ticks. It doesn't matter because you're close to that forest edge. You're close to that woodland habitat, right? How do leaves and snow interact with ticks, right? They work as a protective layer. What they found here, and sometimes people say, like, if we get a really cold winter, what's that going to do to ticks? Well, in this study, the air temperature dropped down to minus 9.4, about 9.4 degrees Fahrenheit, right? That's really cold, right? But the temperature underneath leaves and snow was still 26.6 degrees Fahrenheit, a difference of almost 40 degrees. And ticks will die if temperatures get low enough. But that's got to be lower than minus 9.4, a lot lower, to get those temps underneath leaves and snow down low enough to have any impact on the ticks, right? So they're surviving underneath leaves and snow. So if you've got a yard that looks kind of like this, where you didn't do any fall cleanup, just be aware that when you go out for spring cleanup, they could be like basically little tick condos that you set up all winter, right? So just be aware of it. Wear the repellents, wear the Plymouth when you go for your yard cleanup. Do a tick check afterward. Know that you've been at high risk, right? And be cautious of where you pile these leaves. If you pile these leaves along the edge of your property, what did I tell you? 10 feet from the forest edge is what they like, and you've just pushed this insulating layer out into that particular area. This is what's going to happen, right? Just, again, be aware, especially if you walk past that, like you throw a frisbee, your dog likes to run past that edge and come back over. Just, again, be aware of what's going on. Chemical yard sprays, probably one of the most hotly debated topics. I'm not going to tell you to do one or to not do one, but what I will tell you is how much you should be paying for one, how to do one yourself, when you should get one, and how, I can even answer questions on maybe how effective they might be, right? So chemical yard sprays, what should you do? How should you do it properly, right? You can hire someone, and last time I asked this was before inflation got crazy, so I don't know what it is now. But when I did a poll, and on average around the county, they were charging about $100 to $150 per spray, right? That seems reasonable. You go to Lowe's or Home Depot, you can buy a bottle of something that you hook up to your garden hose like that. Doesn't have to be that brand. And that would cost you $40, right? So you are paying someone up to $110 to do something that you can do yourself, right? So you kind of want to weigh what is the time money, time, like if you make enough money that you could afford to pay someone an extra $110 to do that particular thing, right? And this is going to work just the same as hiring someone, right? It's going to be the same exact thing. So it's a very lucrative profession, which is why you get so many people advertising. You get flyers in the mail, you get people going door to door, because they're making boatloads of cash off of you. What product do you want to use, and what product do you want someone to spray? Go with a synthetic product, right? Go with something that is not all natural. These all natural products, at least in the scientific data, have not been shown to work at all, right? They may work as repellents on our skin, but in terms of a yard spray, killing ticks in the environment, they either fulfill one of two things, right? We had a product on the market that was taken off the market, it's no longer available. That worked on ticks, but what we found is it also killed pollinators and killed plants, and so that was pulled off the market, right? So they say it's all natural, it's not going to hurt pollinators, but this thing did. So it killed ticks and it killed pollinators, right? Now we have something on the market, a few things on the market that do absolutely nothing to ticks and nothing to anything else, right? So now what you're paying for is this treatment for your yard that just makes your yard smell like an Italian kitchen, and that's basically all it does, right? It makes you feel good about yourself, right? But so the bottom line is if it works on ticks, it kills everything else, or it doesn't work at all. So what you want is a synthetic product, again, because they go through APA, they get tested, you know what you're getting when the spray happens. It's going to work every time. When do you spray? You only need 2 sprays per year. So if you are on a spray plan, like a lot of these people set up, they're spraying your yard more times than you actually need. And there's nothing against the law about it, although it's morally, in my opinion, objectionable, because you only need the 2 sprays. You spray once early mid-May, second time early mid-June. That's going to provide all the tick protection you need for the whole year. And yes, you can get bit by a tick any day of the year, including today, but this is the time when you want to do the yard sprays. This is because this is the time that coincides with the nymphal emergence. And if you knock that population down, what we find is that actually reduces the population in the fall as well. So you do the 2 sprays back to back here. Once we get into July, you're not going to see the nymphs anymore, right? So a lot of times what happens is people get the spray in April, May, and June. The person stops by in June. They say, hey, I'm so good. Why don't you book it for the next? And people are like, well, yeah, there's no more ticks. If you stop that spray, there's still going to be no ticks, right? They're still going to be pretty much done. And you see this blue peak. These are the larvae. The larvae don't really like biting people, and they never carry Lyme disease. So you don't even need to worry about that, right? And then that peak reduces the nymphs in May and June, hits the adults in the fall. So it actually helps year-round by just doing the 2 sprays. That's all you need. So again, if you wanted to do this, for $80 a year, you can do the 2 sprays yourself, or you can pay someone an arm and a leg, right? What if a tick still bites you? Don't Google any symptoms. The symptoms are very generalized, nondescript: headache, nausea, fatigue. I feel like that every single day. Maybe you guys feel like that now at like almost 7:30, after I've been screaming at you, ticks, 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 like all these things, right? But I'm telling you, go to your primary care physician or go to a physician, get that officially diagnosed. Don't try to Google anything. But what you do want to do, in addition to pulling that tick off properly, you want to save that tick, right? You don't want to just throw it away. And I know a lot of people like to take vengeance out on these ticks. I've heard crazy things about what people do to these ticks, and I'm like, that's the real you. The thing that you told me that you do to ticks, that's the real you, right? Anyways, the date of the tick is important, and the species. So you pull that tick off. One of the best ways to save the tick, take it, stick it under Scotch tape, stick that to a calendar. You have the date, the tick, all of that right on the calendar, right? You know. And here's the reason why, right? The date is important because the onset of symptoms is often about 2 weeks after you're bit. It's not always 2 weeks, but that's like an average, right? So if you go to your doctor and you say, well, doc, I don't feel well, but I was bit by a tick 2 weeks ago, now your doctor is looking at something different, right? Or like, for instance, if you go to your doctor and you're like, well, I was at this like bachelor party and we were all sharing drinks and one person had COVID, right? They're going to be looking at something, right? You tell your doctor, okay, I don't feel well. Now your doctor's looking at like, okay, what's common? What could possibly happen? Bit by a tick 2 weeks ago. Oh, that's going to alert your doctor. Okay, like we need to focus in on this. The species is really important, right? We looked at that chart. Not all diseases are carried by all ticks, right? So knowing that species can inform your doctor on what to look for. You're bit by a dog tick. Now your doctor might be thinking, oh, well, the risk of Lyme disease, like you could be bit by another tick somewhere else in your body that we don't know about, or it could be, like you're just not going to get Lyme disease from this dog tick, right? But you can get a few other diseases, Rocky Mountain spotted fever and things like that can be transmitted by dog ticks. So it's going to be different, right? How do you know the species, right? You don't have to be a tick expert. You don't have to be able to identify ticks, because there are people on the internet that are and that can identify ticks for you. Go to the University of Rhode Island's Tick Spotters. They run this free service that anyone can use. Take a picture on your phone, submit it online. It's very, very simple. And you just submit it, and they'll identify it to you very, very quickly. And then you can take that information, and it's not just like, well, I posted this on Facebook, and this is what my friend said. They think, no, it's, I got this identified by the University of Rhode Island, and that's going to have a little bit more weight, I believe, when you go to your doctor's office, right? So that they know that it's not just like someone random person that said it was a deer tick. Tick testing. So this is something that your doctor probably will not use for medical diagnosis at all, but something that might put your mind at ease is as testing the actual tick. So not testing yourself for disease. That's what your doctor would do, right? This is, you can send the tick off, and they will run genetic testing on that tick and look at the inside of that tick to determine what germs are in that tick and what species that tick was, right? So they can do that, and they do that for a fee. It costs about $50 last time I checked. But again, that can give you peace of mind, or it can maybe make you a little bit nervous, or maybe people are like creeped out by it. But what can be helpful, for instance, is this woman. She's 79 years old. She lives in Plymouth. She got this tick tested. It came back with the germ that causes Lyme disease and the one that causes babesiosis. And these two, if she were to come down with them, are typically treated with different types of medication, right? So she goes to her doctor's office and says she feels sick, was bit by a deer tick. Her doctor may think that she may test for both of them, or may not, right? But if she's only given one set of medication and she's not responding, well, now she could tell her doctor, oh, this tick was carrying this pathogen too. That might put something else on the doctor's radar, right? Or even just telling the doctor, hey, look, I don't know if I have this, I may not have this, right? But this tick was carrying both, so let's keep that in mind when we're going through this process, right? That can be helpful. Or your doctor might just say like, oh, I don't really care, like let's just test you for both anyway. That's what I always do, is test people for both. Some doctors do that. But what if this person was just visiting Plymouth and lived in the Midwest, right? Or lived in California? Now she can bring this tick report with her to California, where a doctor may not have this at all on their radar, completely, right? So tick testing does have its value. In addition, this is the reason why we knew that Heartland and Bourbon virus was found in New York, is through the tick testing. So it does serve a more greater benefit, a scientific purpose of telling us what pathogens are in what areas. Rashes, take any pictures. You have any weird rash, take a picture, show your doctor. Don't Google it, show your doctor. A lot of people have the bullseye rash when it comes to Lyme disease, but this is also the bullseye rash, even though it doesn't look like a bullseye. So any rash that you at all that you see following a tick bite, and it doesn't have to even be where the tick bit. You could be bit on your hand and have a rash on your back. So take pictures of any of these rashes, show your doctor. And last but not least, with the right knowledge and awareness, tick-borne diseases are preventable. And that's what I want to really end with, is that you guys all have that control, right? You have that power to stop these ticks, to prevent them from biting. And even when they do bite, you can really mitigate that risk of getting sick, right? It's just a matter of knowing what to do. At this point, I'll take any questions that people might have, or any stories that they might want to share. Or if people may be a bit too shy, you can always email me, or you can always call me, or message me on Facebook. I do respond to all three.
I have to tell you that everything you've said is like I've seen in action.
Good.
Because when I actually got Lyme, I didn't know I had been bit, and I was careful all the time, and I realized that I got bit when I brought something out to the compost bin, which is right along the way back in the yard with
Yes.
the dark,
Where they like to hang out.
I
Yes.
had a pair of flip-flops on, and it's the only time I ever went outside out in the backyard without being covered. And I still, to this day, I have like a mark from afterwards.
Wow.
I got rashes, and that's how I knew. And I sent
Yep.
the pictures to my doctor. My doctor said, come in, I think you have Lyme. They tested me for Lyme.
Yep.
And I did, and they gave me antibiotics for a month, and I've been fine since.
Good.
Probably because it was early.
But it's because
Yep.
I was like, something's up, and
Yep.
I didn't Google it.
Yeah.
And I called the doctor because it's like, oh.
Can you come to all my presentations? Permethrin works. It's awesome.
Definitely.
These things work.
But it only takes one time
Yes.
to let your guard down,
Yep.
and
For them to be waiting.
the little buggers wait for you.
Because there's so many. We live in an area where there's just so many. They're just everywhere.
I grew up in Hanson, and I can remember having ticks when I was younger, but I haven't in years. But I also tried not to go places where I can't avoid them completely, but I went walking one time in Forge Park in the summertime, and I said I would never come back here again because this is tick heaven. It was dark, it was wet, and like, nope. I left open.
We do find that the tick populations are changing, like the species are changing, and they're even increasing in certain areas. They have changed a lot since like the 80s, right, or even before then.
Yeah.
They've
'Cause I just remember the dog ticks, not so much the deer ticks.
Yep, the deer ticks are getting worse, but in some locations, it's the Lone Star tick actually ends up replacing the deer tick in some locations. So like there might be some kind of like competitive nature between the two. Yeah, it's weird. They both feed on deer, and we don't know if there's some kind of like interaction between that. So the deer ticks, the reason they do get their name deer tick is that they really like deer, especially in the adult stage. So that's where you find a large number of them are on deer in the adult stage. And then the Lone Star tick also really likes deer at most stages, but really as the adult stage too. But Lone Star tick likes deer pretty much all the time. And so we don't know if like there's something kind of going on with that. We're not sure, but in places like you see like Connecticut, like parts of Connecticut and stuff, where they have a lot more Lone Star tick. There are certain areas where it used to have all deer tick, and now it's just all Lone Star tick, basically.
So it's almost like, do they do something that changes the chemistry of the deer?
Or maybe trigger something in there, like maybe cause the deer to have like an immune response against the deer ticks. Yeah, like maybe, I told you, like deer ticks, they like to knock out our immune systems, but there are some people that do actually get itchy when they get bit by ticks, and generally it's people that have been bit by ticks a lot of times. Like they've been bit by ticks like hundreds of times, and they just pull the ticks off. Their body has developed almost like vaccinated itself against ticks. And so maybe there's something that can happen. Like we do see that in some animals where if they're bit by a number of ticks, they will develop an immune response to these ticks. So maybe it's possible deer are developing an immune response to the deer ticks through maybe the saliva of a Lone Star tick. I don't actually know. That's just a guess. I'm not really sure, but we do see that kind of replacing, or maybe because the Lone Star tick is so active, so the Lone Star tick actually does have good vision and will actually run after things, right? Like a spider, right? Like it kind of runs after things. We don't know if that's also something. I don't know. It's kind of a funny thing.
There's nothing you can give the deer to make the ticks not like them.
There is. There's a few things that people have tried doing, treatments for deer on a landscape level, but they're incredibly expensive and they don't always work. Like we're talking incredibly expensive. You need like millions and millions of dollars. Like you would have to set something like. It's like what they have one option is they have these like feeding stations where the permethrin you got on your clothes, or like the one that you would treat a dog with, right? They have those stations set up where the deer come over and they eat corn out of a bin, and there are these rollers that the deer have to walk through, and it treats the full deer. Yeah, it treats them. There's another one where they're talking about putting bait that is actually a vaccine against them. So the animals eat the bait and they get vaccinated, right, at the same time. So you can actually vaccinate, but you need a lot of the bait to vaccinate on this very large scale, right? And same thing with the stations, like they have to be a certain density within a certain area Otherwise, you have pockets where the deer are not being treated, and it doesn't work. If you don't have
everybody.
Yeah, or it doesn't work. You need that kind of like that kind of thing going on. Yeah, literally deer herd immunity. Yeah, exactly. And the stations are very expensive to set up. You need techs to run them. You need because it's pesticide. Yeah, it's pesticide that you're applying to these rollers. It's a big process, right? Or there have been cases where people have in some islands they've reduced the deer populations down very, very low, and that can cause a crash in the tick population. So the ticks stay there. They're at a lower level. With 0 deer, the ticks are still there, but they're at a very, very low level, right? So the ticks, they really do crash out when the deer aren't there, but they're not 0 ticks, right? They're still around, but a lot fewer. Yeah, and they probably will. They can, because they can move across water. That's how they get to the island in the beginning. In some places, I think in that particular study, the deer were brought into that island, so they're not going to really go back anytime soon. But in some islands, they are close enough that the deer can walk past. They can either walk past sandbars and things like that kind of shoot up. So yeah, lots of stuff. Yeah. Other questions?
So I guess for Lyme disease, you have to do year-round.
Yes, I definitely recommend having Lyme disease, not really being nervous about it again, but always being aware that the risk of Lyme disease is there every single day of the year. The only times where you can kind of be more or less certain that you're not going to get bit by a tick, when it's below freezing. So about 39 degrees is kind of that, so 32 to 39, ticks are very lethargic. They almost will never attach. It's very hard to find ticks from 32 to 39, right? But they still can. Below 32, they're pretty much never gonna climb up you, right? So below freezing, right? Once we hit the 40s, the ticks are just as active in the 40s as they would be in the 70s, right? They're they can be very, very active in the 40s. The other time that ticks don't really like to be active is when it's raining. So the times that we don't really like to be outside, right? Raining and below freezing, right? But the ticks really like 40s and 50s or 70s, no rain, not things the times we like to be outside, right? And that's when you notice it. It's oh, it's a nice day. I'm gonna go and do yard work. It's not raining this weekend. That's yeah, exactly.
My leaves are full of ticks.
Just be aware. So the ticks, they're not very fast, so they're not going to move in. They're not smart. So if you have the ticks, let's say you have the leaves here, your yard's kind of set up like this, the ticks aren't going to move into the center of your yard necessarily, unless mice were coming down, laying down, and maybe dropping them off, or animals were carrying them. Mm-hmm. But the ticks aren't really necessarily, they don't migrate that quickly to the center of your yard, but it could potentially happen. I would focus mostly on the edges of your property. Still, even though you have leaves in the center, but just be aware that now that there are leaves there, that does create that protective layer, that if any ticks were to be dropped off there or were to move out there, they would survive, yeah. So likelihood is low, but you've now increased the ability for them to survive in that area.
Because they have someplace to hide. To stay
yes. Yep, and stay protected from any, the very little snow that we got. So a lot of people are yes, little snow, but for me, I'm the snow's good,
So what about, I had heard something about chickens eat ticks.
That's
Is that a fallacy?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. That's based on a few very limited studies, and it's not really chickens. What ended up happening, so there have been very, very limited data on these. It's kind of one of those things urban legend, old wives' tales kind of things. What we found in one study was that African helmeted guinea hen, the guinea fowl, can eat ticks in certain areas, but they're not necessarily the friendliest chickens, and they're not your regular chicken that's going to egg-laying chicken, right? And then in some studies, they've done things where they've taken a chicken and penned it in an area, not free range, but just pen it in an area, and then they'll just drop ticks in that cage and see if the chickens will eat it. And in some cases, I think the chickens were plucking the engorged ticks, and they weren't and that's it. Yeah, and that's it. Yeah. And so what people I think mistake this for is that chickens are always scratching and digging at things in the dirt, and people think they must be ticks, right? Well, there's a lot of things that chickens can be eating. It can be anything, right? And even just like that scratching behavior and stuff might create an environment that ticks don't necessarily want to survive in, right? Because they're reducing the vegetation in the area. They're doing a lot of things in the area that might just create an environment. So they're not necessarily eating the ticks, but there may be some association with fewer ticks based on the chickens. But again, the studies are really limited, and even the things I'm saying right now, there's not really been a study on that. I wouldn't get chickens.
Oh, get rid of the ticks?
Yes. If you get the chickens because you like chickens and you want fresh eggs,
right,
by all means, yeah. But don't get chickens thinking they're going to be like free pest control. Yeah.
It's not going to happen.
Yep. All right, great. Well, I appreciate your time. Thank you all for coming out. If anything comes up, just let me know.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.